right, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with such amazing panelists. My name is Pinar Oskan, and I'm a professor of entrepreneurship and innovation at Oxford University. And I'm also the director of a research center there called Oxford Future of Finance and Technology Initiative, where we do lots of research on AI in finance. But there's some amazing people here that I want to give the word to. So I'll start with Wendy for introducing ourselves, and then we'll dive right into the topic.
Thank you. So I'm Wendy Jeffson. So my background, I'll just start with my experience with AI. I had a fintech and redtech startup where we were using machine learning to profile traders' behavior. That was bought by NASDAQ. I was an inaugural member of the AI ethics committee at NASDAQ and set up and ran their research and ideation team where we tested out AI for capital market abuse. And I can talk a bit about how that went. And I'm now founder of Let's Think, which is a startup. Our purpose is to help people think brilliantly. With 1 billion knowledge workers in the world whose job is to think for a living, that's about a quarter of the working population. We believe that there is technology to help people think with is the way forward, or part of the way forward. Thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Ben?
Ben Maxim, I'm the Chief Digital Strategy and Innovation Officer at a $7.4 billion financial institution in Michigan in the United States. MSUFCU. I run our innovation lab, and my experience with AI is really surrounding conversational AI and using data to provide insights to our members and also our employees to provide more products and services to our membership.
Fantastic. Davide?
Davide Martucci, CEO and co-founder of NextGetTech, with a fintech based in Luxembourg and London, using AI to automatize different processes in the fund industry.
Amazing. And as you can see, we have both the perspectives of larger institutions as well as startups in the way that we understand and use data and use ML and AI tools. So just to start, my first question to them is going to be, what are some of the best use cases that we have seen so far in terms of AI within finance? Because as you know, finance is an industry which is both data intensive, which means that there's lots of opportunities, but it's also highly regulated, which puts extra constraints, and there's also cultures and legacy IT systems which are built on top of that compliance structure. So it's a particularly interesting industry to look at when it comes to AI. So wanted to start maybe with Ben in terms of some of the things that you have done both in your institution and that you've seen in the industry.
Absolutely. So a lot of what we're focused on is more broadly automation. So conversational AI is really the automation of the customer experience. So really focused there. Also, how do you use and unlock all the data? So financial institutions have rich data sets. There are a lot of legacy systems, though, so there's a lot of data governance, data quality that does make it hard to do some of this. So a lot of our ability to kind of play in the AI space requires partners with fintechs and startups to help us unlock the power of that. More recently, we've been working with our conversational AI partner to integrate LLMs to help improve the training data and also the speed to market for some of the updates that we have to do in training our chatbot.
Fantastic. Wendy?
I think there's a huge amount of interest in using, and it already is being used. I think the challenge is definitely with the data. I've retrained to be a behavioral scientist to improve decision making, went into financial services because so many decisions are made and captured in data, but it's blooming hard to get your hands on the data. So the challenge is a very, very real one. There's enormous amounts of data, though, generated, which just can't be read by everybody. I mean, and even some of the documents that get created are created by so many people. You don't have one person reading the whole document to make sense of it. So I think there's lots of individual use cases that can be used and thought about to make greater efficiencies. I think we have to think carefully about the effectiveness and what you might lose in getting those efficiencies. And we could talk about that as well. But I think that there's a lot on the chatbot side in terms of customer support, where there's a lot of repetitive questions that go on and that kind of thing.
Davide?
I mean, there are plenty of application and plenty of use cases. I can speak about what we do at NextGetTech, which is more in the operation side. So using different model of machine learning to spot anomalies and handle as well all the data management prior to using other models. But I think in general, I mean, like AI in financial services is used, yes, for your example, but as well for finding signals and patterns in investment, AML, this is one of the use cases, which is and everything that is related to documents. And it's my view that the main complexity additional to the data is as well the understanding of the different application in the business itself. So meaning that there is a need of educating the different big institutions on where they can use AI or other models to smooth their processes. So that's something that we were facing even more than the data issue.
Exactly. So, and you know, I love how you guys mentioned both examples of customer-facing uses of AI and also backstage and kind of more B2B AI. And there are different challenges associated with either one. So maybe going back to Ben, what are some of the attitudes and some of the challenges that you face on the customer side with in chatbots and other ways to use AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're taking what is a high-touch interaction with a human and automating that. So there's fear from both the employee side and the customer side that they're going to be automated, given to the robots. No one likes calling the automated phone system and having to punch a bunch of numbers to get through the process and never get to talk to an actual person. So one thing we try to do is make it easy to do a fallback or get that agent if you need to. So again, the bot's really good at the repetitive, simple queries and really leaving the more complex to the employees to handle, and really just being smart about how do we allow it to transition and how do we really force it through. The thing for us, we're not able to offer 24/7 service with humans, so this allows our members to have an extended period of service from us. So there is benefit there. We also used it to learn what do people need in the middle of the night, and usually it's related to their payments going through. So if their card's declined or some frauds happened or they lost their card or whatever it is, that's what people most need and are most concerned about and need help in that moment. And they're happy if the chatbot is the one who helps them as long as it's being taken care of. So.
Fantastic. And in fact, one of the things that we see in our research at Oxford is that there are 3 ways in which AI can make products and services in finance better. And that is, the example that you're giving is faster response, faster delivery of services. And then, of course, it can also be cheaper because as we understand data, we are able to give the right response without involving humans or maybe having one human in the loop. But then there's also the ability to make the products better by understanding customers. And all of those are great progresses, but at the same time, there's that barrier of does the human actually want to talk with the machine?
Yep. And then I should add to your second point, we've been able to kind of replace in volume with our chatbot 34 FTEs worth of work as well.
Yeah.
So it's taking a lot, and a lot of people are willing and wanting to talk to the AI.
Fantastic. Now, maybe to go to Davide quickly, when it comes to B2B uses of AI, what are some of the challenges that you face as you work with other institutions and make use of their data?
Yes. So we are actually way more boring than the chatbot example. What we do is more automatizing internal processes on banks, so the operation. And I think I come back on my point of before, which is one of the challenge that we see is making understand big institution how to implement different models at different stage of the value chain. So this is what we do is like your example of a chatbot. This is like one model, right? Like that's the application of AI. For us, it's more using a different model, a different part of the technology that we provide to the client, starting from whatever classification algorithms in the data management, into other models that can be there to cluster, they can be there to spot different patterns and then help the operation inside. But again, for me, what is important is the education, not only of the people that come work for us, but for the customer as well, like that they understand exactly what we are doing because we are touching like core processes, and sometimes using one model instead of another that needs to be explained, and I think it's the challenge that we see.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, and maybe also for Wendy, one of the things that that is becoming very obvious here is that the different types of institutions, different types of stakeholders in finance have different issues, different challenges, but also different advantages when it comes to AI and data. And so, for example, a large institution might be sitting on top of lots of data, and a new entrant might be having the analytical tools, but having trouble accessing data. What are some of the attitudes that you've seen in the industry so far?
I mean, I think that the challenge of getting people to understand something new, and in a highly regulated industry where everything has been in place for a long time and it's explained and understood, that can be an enormous challenge to get in the door. And the way that we've kind of approached it, both actually at NASDAQ and as a startup, is our view is the human actually has a huge amount of knowledge in their heads. We all know people who have been on the verge of leaving their organization, and people say, oh my goodness, can you imagine what's going to leave with them when they go? And it's never written down. And we have methodologies that help capture that knowledge and designing tools to help capture that knowledge in a way that you can share it with other people, which is important for other people to then, that creates a data set that's missing. And at the moment that is missing from the AI, for the AI data sets. And that's something we found at NASDAQ when we were looking for capital market abuse. Comparing rules-based models and algorithms that generated alerts from that to an AI model, it was much less effective, and you couldn't explain it, whereas the rules-based model, completely explainable, which is exactly what the regulators want to see. But what we learned from that was actually the different data sets that were being used, because we used behavioral science methods to capture the knowledge in people's head that they were using and the different data sets they were referring to, which then means you can create those additional data sets and feed them into a model to make it more effective. And that learning is super important. And I shared it with 600 of NASDAQ's clients. So I'm not telling you anything that's not out in the public domain with that. It's really important to recognize the data sets you've got, understand that, understand how people currently are doing that as experts and how they're using it. And if you tap into how people who are doing the job really well use the information, then you're much more likely to unlock the ability, the willingness to give you the data sets. And also being able to do that in a way that you can share it with your novices and support them so that they can learn, which is increasingly difficult in a hybrid time of learning. And people who are more expert quite like working from home, not coming in and sharing that expertise. So.
That's amazing. And did you see an attitude of or fear of being replaced by those who are receiving the product?
Well, interestingly, because we started with the people who are experts, so you get the people who actually quite like telling you about how they do things. Nobody asks them the questions in the way that we ask them. They then realize their own knowledge and experience, because you don't articulate it. That's why it doesn't get it written down, because you don't articulate it when you're an expert. So they actually quite enjoyed sharing that. And then because you're explaining how much more complex it really is, compared to a policy document or a training program, they kind of go, yeah, I told you it was hard. We did this for fund managers, and they said, I told you it wasn't easy. It's not 3 boxes, So that was our way in. And then it highlights, as I say, the different data sets that are being used. And then big organizations can make a decision about whether or not to have a data integration program, because they can begin to see, well, okay, if I spend the time and effort, I might be able to see how often it's going to get used, when it's going to use, what's the value add to it, and I can consider it's hard work integrating data and expensive.
Yeah.
So, and there's the things that get cut unless you can rationalize them well.
I think what is interesting is that we see exactly the same, particularly for a small company like us. We are 40 people. We have to sell to very big institutions. And it's like if you are selling twice. So you are explaining to the management what is their interest, and is where you have to educate and come with a kind of structured pitch. And then the user themselves is exactly what you were saying, like on how extracting or collecting their knowledge to either train the model or as well help them in the workflow of using the technology without make them fear that they will be replaced. So this is another point. So the challenge is as well that is positioning the technology at the two level in the complexity and navigating that when it's maybe not understood.
Yeah. Just adding to that, I mean, we used to go into meetings with more people from the banks than there were in our company in the room, and you're trying to pitch a different story to every single person in the room, and that's just a challenge. And then when we got bought by NASDAQ, it was really easy. Completely different ball game because you're a known quantity then, aren't you?
Exactly. No, I think that in fact that the selling of these tools to large organizations is a huge issue that we see through every single fintech, B2B fintech that we see. And I wanted to give the word to you on that. What would be some of your suggestions in terms of really making that credible pitch to a large organization?
It's first accepting that sales cycles are super long. As a small company, this is a challenge, particularly at the beginning. We have been lucky to have venture capital backing us at the beginning, and so compensate long sales cycle. But in terms of achieving selling this kind of technology, I think again it goes through the education. So having the team and the people and the resources internally to being able to educate the customer and the different user, and invest in the technology a lot. Like what we did since the beginning is investing even more in the product and the technology, because when you go to see this kind of institution, you have one shot. If they do a demo, or like you have the chance to go in a beta at the very beginning, you cannot miss, particularly in this kind of application. And I think that for particularly in the fintech space, for decades, big companies, big banks have been disappointed a bit about the real application of machine learning and AI in their processes, where a lot of fintech were coming and maybe overselling or overpromising and then under-delivering. Yeah. So it's a challenge now to come and say, yeah, but now the technology advanced, now we can do it, now we invested in the product and we can bring it. So yeah, what my learn on that is really investing in the product and take the time to educate.
And in fact, one of the things that entrepreneurs sometimes understand a bit late is that you actually need quite a bit of human power in order to hold the customer's hand. And unless, if you don't do that, that your product sits as an icon on their desktop and nobody actually can invest or the time to understand it. So you do need quite a few people in order to do this, right?
Of course, and it's even more than that. I think that at the beginning you even build the product and the technology with your customers, and that requires people that can speak with the different users and different counterpart in the customers, in the customer side. So yes, of course you need people, you need the good one. This is one of the main challenge, I think, for all tech companies. It's one of the challenge for us, and yeah, we will not be less in the future. I think it will be more and more a challenge.
Yeah. No, I think just being the buyer in these meetings, right? So there's a lot to what you just said. It's really educating on the use cases around it. You have great technology, you can invest in technology, but if you're just going to tell people this is the technology, they don't know what it is. They don't know how to use it.
Very true.
So to your point, you don't just sell it. You have to help them activate it. You have to help them figure out how to make it not just the icon on their desktop. So I think that's where we've had the most success with fintech startups. We're the ones that helped us not just get it in the door, but also help us kind of foster it over time as well. And absolutely acknowledging very slow sales cycle. That's part of the process. In banks, we have all these regulations and everything we have to follow. Yeah. We're trying, and I'm trying, on my own, when I talk to kind of the banking audience, like, hey, we should be better clients as well. So how do we improve our process? So we ended up creating an innovation lab to allow us to more quickly work with startups. So there's still, the vendor due diligence process that happens, but we do it in a smaller, more compact way and take as much of the risk out of it so we can actually get something out the door and then prove out our use cases versus it's just, well, here's all this stuff it can do. We actually are proving that it can work, and then that startup now has something they can then tell other clients as well.
Yeah, I think it's the very interesting point when he says like all the due diligence that you have to go through as a company. And very often, I don't know who had this experience, but you see that it's not made for this kind of technology, right?
No, it's
like
not at all. It's
the questions
for,
that are raised on those kind of due diligence.
It's made for the 30-year-old company that's been selling technology, technology for 30 years.
Exactly. So, yes, this is clearly a challenge. Yeah. And the use case, what you are saying, coming with a use case which is precise. If you really wanted that the technology is used broadly into the company, it's a very important point, yes.
Okay. And one of the complications is that the technology is dependent on your own data. Right? You need to open up your data in order for it to start to make sense and to see value. And that, I'm sure, creates certain anxieties within the organization.
No, that in my 3 years running our innovation lab, that's been the biggest challenge, was overcoming that. So really starting to use some of the open banking platforms like Plaid and some of the others to really use that as a way to do risk mitigation, so they're not directly accessing our core data, but the user themselves are the ones provisioning and permissioning that data. So they're saying, yes, you can use my data to do something, which if we were to get in the way of, we can't actually do anyway, because you can do this because they own their data. So I think it was interesting to approach it that way. And now if I say we're using open banking here, then okay, you can start your pilot and go at it. And then we do the more deeper diligence when we actually want to go and actually connect into the core. And we're trying to build enabling technologies on our side to make it easier for fintechs to come in and take that data, use it in one place. Everyone needs a certain set of data, so actually building one set of APIs that everyone can come and grab whatever they need.
Exactly. So one of the topics that's, I think, quite important to address as well is the role of regulation, because regulation can be an obstacle, but it can also be an enabler, like in the case of open banking and open finance, allowing you to access data in a way that you couldn't before. So I wanted to get your experiences with regulation, both the good and the bad. Maybe starting with Wendy.
I mean, I think the big challenge for the organisations is there's so much of it for a start. And once you've got it, you've got a solution in place and you've explained it, they come in and they check that you're doing it in that way. And it's very hard to take something out once you put something in. You just have to keep adding to it. I've had some fantastic experiences with the FCA running regulatory sandboxes and their tech sprints. So promoting, and they connect in across the world with the regulators to encourage a more innovative stance. So I think certainly the FCA has led the world in opening up people's views of acceptability of engaging with new tech. That's been phenomenal. But it's not to be underestimated that you have on the one side the innovative side of the regulators, but they still have a very heavy enforcement arm. And sometimes it's just not worth the risk.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the process of getting licensed for a new organization may also add to the complications. Yes.
I mean, we are not at NextGet Tech. We provide for asset managers and banks, so they are heavy regulated entities. But I joined the point that for me, it's regulators are triggers as well of this innovation. And in one of the technology that is not AI, but it's for us very related to that, which is cloud. And on that, we cannot speak about AI without cloud, right? This is just impossible. If you want to deploy something at scale in a company, and that is now regulated, the regulation on how to use cloud in banking and financial institution in a regulated manner. And that changed the game to bring AI in the industry.
Fantastic. So before we open up to questions, I want to give the word to Ben in terms of the way that you experience regulation as an enabler versus obstacle.
Yeah, absolutely. So our regulators for the credit unions in the United States have really embraced fintech in the past few years and created an office to really explore it and use it as a way to promote financial inclusion. So that's how they're looking at it. They're meeting with fintechs directly. They're trying to understand the technology, and they like to say things like, what rule says you can't do that? So if you can point to a rule, then they'll have a conversation about So I think there's a lot of perception that we can't do things that we maybe actually can, and sometimes that then frees us to think about it. And sometimes if there's no regulation, then we're afraid to jump in because, well, what happens if we go down this path and all of a sudden regulation comes in later? And I think that's stopped buy now, pay later, that stopped crypto. a little bit. And then one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest opportunities for financial services and machine learning AI is lending and getting more loans booked using alternative data sets. And really, it's the explainability that's lost. So you really have to use the AI and machine learning to train a model, and then that model has to be consistent across the board. And as long as you're doing that, then you can tell the regulators this is how the model's applied to every single person who applies for a loan. But then you can use all the great machine learning AI power to build the model in the first place.
Fantastic. Let's take some questions. I think we might have time for a couple of questions from the audience. I think there's a mic that's going to come around. All right, even more time for me, unless you want to speak. All right, there's one.
Really quick question. What did ChatGPT do to your organizations? Did it do anything? What did it do to your staff?
Yep, so for us, it's gotten everyone interested. I can't go anywhere without someone asking about ChatGPT anymore. So what are we going to do with it? How do we use it? How can we play with it? So we're working with our conversational AI partner, Boost AI, to use LLMs in the background to make our chatbot stronger, be able to answer more questions, be able to answer more member queries without having to do a lot of work to build out the training data.
Anything for you?
Yeah, so I go next. I think, we're a small team, so first of all, it's, well, how can it make us get more done? But actually, just playing with it also makes you realize, I think it's really great for people who've got some knowledge and experience already, because they can do what they know how to do faster, and they can debug what comes out. They can pull it apart. I think the challenges for people, again, is at the novice level. If you start automating the things that the novices actually learn their craft on, we need to think really carefully about what we're doing. I used to be a lawyer back in the trainee days a long time ago. We used to sit and proofread contracts to each other. And you'd think, my God, why would you do that? How boring. I mean, yeah, it was fairly boring. But just reading through, you would begin to understand the interactions between the different clauses and what was going on, what difference did a comma make to the meaning in that sentence. And that has massive implications. You have huge litigation over different interpretations of contracts. So I think we just need to be really mindful. I think it's really interesting seeing how people are using it, but with a level of skill already, and what the people underneath that, what skills they will need to be able to ask questions of it in order to interrogate it and learn in an effective way.
Fantastic. So I think we have one more question. Either one.
All right, thank you. So my question is to Debbie. How do you think the big financial institutions are responding to open banking? Do you think they're becoming more collaborative with the fintechs? And then how do you see it coming?
Like for my area of expertise, which is more like asset management, but I can answer. I see financial institutions being more and more open to accept a real broad implementation of AI in their institution, but still with a lot of challenges that we were saying before, so the regulation, the education, and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's clearly a path where we see more and more open mind in those big financial institutions.
So at Oxford, we do quite a bit of open banking research, and one of the changes that we observed is that at the beginning, the attitude was generally quite defensive. It's my data, and this is something that I should use rather than anyone else. But over time, I think banks have realized that they can get access to other data as well. So it is a two-way street. It's not just about opening up your data, but it's about understanding what data exists in other institutions and making sense of it, making sense of one client in a holistic way, understanding what the client is doing somewhere else. And so that mindset and understanding, there's the opportunity here that really has shifted the mindset a little bit. Would you agree, Ben?
No, absolutely. I think that's how we're looking at it as well, is now what can we get back as well in terms of data, not just what are we giving up. So we really do it. And then the United States market, there's the Financial Data Exchange, FDX. That's a group of industry players, both large banks and fintech, that are coming together to create a standard We don't have GDPR there, but that's kind of the closest thing.
Fantastic. So I think we're out of time. There's a red light in front of me shining. So with that, I want to thank you, everyone, and thank you for the questions. See you next time.